They fired me while I was sitting in an ambulance beside my little girl. I thought that was the worst moment of my life, but I had no idea what would happen 3 days later. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Kaya Wynn. I lived a quiet life in Chicago with my 6-year-old daughter, Nori. I worked as a financial analyst for a company called Varello Group. I wasn't rich or powerful, but I worked hard every single day. I stayed late, fixed problems nobody else wanted, and trusted the people I worked for. Everything changed on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I got a call from Nori's school while I was finishing a report. Her teacher was crying so hard I could barely understand her. Nori had fallen during recess and hit her head badly. By the time I reached the hospital ambulance, my daughter was unconscious. I sat beside her holding her tiny hand while machines beeped around us. I kept telling her mommy was there and she was going to be okay, even though I was terrified inside. Then my phone buzzed. At first, I ignored it. I thought it was another work message asking about spreadsheets or deadlines. But the phone kept vibrating. Finally, I looked down and saw an email from my supervisor, Soren Pike. The subject line said, "Termination notice." No phone call. No warning. No human conversation. Just a cold message telling me my position had been eliminated effective immediately. While my daughter was fighting for her life, my company decided I was no longer useful to them. I sat outside Nori's hospital room for hours, staring at the white walls and trying to understand how my life had fallen apart in a single afternoon. Doctors kept walking past me with serious faces while I waited for updates about my little girl. At the same time, my phone filled with work emails as if nothing had happened. What hurt the most wasn't losing the job. It was who did it. Soren Pike had been my supervisor for almost 5 years. He always acted like he cared about employees. He brought donuts on Fridays, remembered birthdays, and called our team a family. I believed him. I defended him when other coworkers complained about him. I trusted that man completely. I missed holidays because of deadlines he gave me. I stayed awake until 2 in the morning fixing reports before investor meetings. Once, I even canceled a weekend trip with Nori because the company lost an important client account and Soren begged me to help repair the damage. After everything I gave them, he couldn't even call me personally. Late that night, a hospital billing employee approached me with a clipboard. She looked uncomfortable while checking the computer again and again. Then she quietly asked, "Ma'am, do you have another insurance provider?" My stomach dropped. I told her my insurance was through Varello Group. She hesitated before speaking. "It says your coverage ended earlier today." The exact same day they fired me. I felt sick. Nori was still connected to machines inside that room, and suddenly I had no idea how I was supposed to pay for any of it. Every scan, every treatment, every doctor visit started turning into numbers I couldn't afford. I remember sitting alone in the hallway after midnight trying not to cry because I didn't want Nori to wake up and see fear on my face. The next morning, Nori was finally awake, but she looked weak and confused. Seeing her smile for a second gave me enough strength to stop falling apart. While she rested, I sat near the hospital window with my old company laptop on my knees, trying to figure out what to do next. Part of me still hoped the firing was some terrible mistake. I wanted proof that they had treated me unfairly. I started searching through saved reports, emails, and project folders that I had worked on over the years. I knew the company better than most people in that office. Numbers were my job, and small details always stood out to me. After about an hour, I noticed something strange. Several payments listed in quarterly reports didn't match the records I remembered preparing. Huge amounts of money had been sent to consulting companies I had never heard of before. At first, I thought maybe they were new partners added after I left. But the deeper I looked, the worse it became. The same addresses appeared again and again in different files. Tiny companies with no real websites, no employees, and strange overseas bank information. Millions of dollars had quietly moved through those accounts over the last year. My chest tightened. Those weren't normal business payments. Someone inside Varello Group was hiding investor money. I opened another spreadsheet and compared signatures attached to approvals. Soren Pike's name appeared on several transactions beside two senior executives from accounting. Suddenly, pieces started connecting in my mind. Maybe firing me wasn't only about cutting costs. Maybe they were scared I would eventually notice what they were doing. I quickly copied files onto a flash drive from my purse while my hands shook. Then, without warning, the laptop screen froze. A black message appeared in the center. Access revoked. Seconds later, every folder disappeared from the screen. They knew I had found something. That night, I couldn't sleep. Nori was resting peacefully for the first time since the accident, but my mind kept racing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those missing files disappearing from my laptop screen. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Parking garage. Level 3. Come alone. For a second, I thought about ignoring it. After everything that happened, I didn't trust anyone connected to Varello Group anymore. But something in my gut told me this message mattered. I quietly left Nori's room and took the elevator down to the garage. The place was nearly empty except for the sound of distant traffic and flickering overhead lights. My heart pounded while I searched between parked cars. Then I saw him. Elric Shaw. He worked in internal accounting at Varello. Quiet guy. Always kept to himself. Most people barely noticed him during meetings. He looked nervous standing there with his hood pulled over his head like he was scared someone had followed him. The moment he saw me, he said, "You shouldn't trust anyone from the office anymore." I stared at him, confused. "What are you talking about?" He looked around before speaking again. "They didn't fire you because of budget cuts." My stomach tightened. Elric explained that 2 nights before my termination, he overheard Soren Pike and another executive arguing behind a conference room door. My name kept coming up. One of them said I had started asking dangerous questions about account transfers. Then Soren said something Elric couldn't forget. "She knows too much already." I felt cold all over. Elric reached into his backpack and handed me a thick envelope. Inside were printed spreadsheets, approval forms, and transaction records. More detailed than anything I had seen before. "I copied these before they wiped the servers," he whispered. "If they find out I took them, I'm finished." I looked at the papers in my hands and realized this was no longer just about losing my job. This was something much bigger. The days after Nori came home from the hospital were some of the hardest of my life. Every morning started with another bill waiting in the mailbox. Medication, follow-up appointments, therapy sessions, scans, the costs never stopped growing. I spent hours sitting at the kitchen table trying to figure out which payments could wait and which ones couldn't. No matter how many times I checked the numbers, nothing worked. Eventually, I opened a small wooden box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were the last pieces of jewelry my mother left me before she passed away. A silver bracelet, a thin gold necklace, and a pair of earrings she used to wear during holidays. They weren't worth a fortune, but they carried memories I never wanted to lose. Still, Nori needed her medicine more than I needed sentimental things. I sold them 3 days later. The pawn shop owner counted the cash without even looking at me while I stood there trying not to cry. Walking back to my car afterward felt like losing another part of my family. At the same time, things kept getting uglier around Varello Group. Former coworkers slowly stopped replying to my messages. People I once ate lunch with suddenly acted distant. Through Elric, I learned executives had started spreading stories about me inside the company. According to them, I had become emotionally unstable after my firing. Some claimed I acted aggressively at work. Others suggested I couldn't handle pressure anymore. None of it was true. They were trying to destroy my reputation before the truth came out. One afternoon, I ran into an old coworker named Dana at a grocery store near my apartment. We used to work side by side almost every day for 3 years. I smiled when I saw her because part of me still hoped someone from my old life cared. But the second Dana noticed me, she looked away and pushed her cart in the opposite direction without saying a word. That moment hurt more than I expected. It made me realize how completely alone they had left me. 3 days after I lost my job, Varello Group held its annual investor meeting at a luxury hotel in downtown Chicago. In previous years, I helped prepare almost every financial report for that event. I knew exactly how important it was to the company. This time, I watched everything from a small television in the hospital waiting room while Nori slept upstairs. The meeting looked polished from the outside. Expensive suits, smiling executives, bright lights, and giant screens showing profits and future expansion plans. Soren Pike stood confidently at the front of the room like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't destroyed someone's life days earlier. He talked smoothly about company growth and financial transparency. Hearing those words made me sick. I already knew the truth hidden behind those numbers. Earlier that morning, Elric and I had made a decision. We sent copies of the financial records anonymously to several major investors attending the event. No threats. No emotional message. Just evidence. At first, everything during the presentation seemed normal. Then the atmosphere suddenly changed. One older investor near the front interrupted Soren in the middle of a slide presentation. The man held printed documents in his hand and asked why millions of dollars had been transferred to companies that didn't appear in official reports. The room went silent. Soren tried to laugh it off and claimed there was some misunderstanding. But another investor stood up almost immediately with the same documents. Then another. Questions started flying across the room faster than Soren could answer them. Faces around the table changed from calm to angry within minutes. Executives whispered nervously to each other while assistants rushed around checking phones and laptops. For the first time since my firing, I saw fear on Soren's face. His voice started shaking while he tried explaining transactions that clearly made no sense. The confidence he always carried disappeared right in front of everyone watching. And sitting alone in that hospital waiting room, I realized something important. They thought firing me would silence me. Instead, it exposed them. I stayed in the hospital cafeteria long after the investor meeting started. The place smelled like burnt coffee and old fries, and almost nobody was around except a tired nurse sitting near the vending machines. My eyes stayed locked on the livestream playing on my phone. Back at the hotel, the meeting was falling apart faster every minute. One investor demanded to know why invoices had approval signatures that didn't match company records. Another accused the executives of hiding payments through fake contractors. People who had once trusted Varello were now openly questioning everything. I watched Soren Pike wipe sweat from his forehead while trying to answer. He kept stumbling over his own words. Every explanation sounded weaker than the last. Then one investor near the center table leaned forward and said something that changed the entire room. If this company cannot explain where this money went today, my legal team will begin action immediately. Nobody spoke after that. The silence felt heavy even through the screen. I noticed some executives avoiding eye contact with each other. One woman from upper management quietly left the room with her phone pressed tightly against her ear. Another man looked ready to walk out completely. For the first time, they weren't acting powerful anymore. They looked trapped. My phone buzzed with a text message from Elric. "They're panicking." Just those 2 words. I read the message 3 times. A strange feeling slowly replaced the fear that had been crushing me since the ambulance ride. For days, I felt helpless while rich people decided my future behind closed doors. I worried about hospital bills, my daughter's recovery, and whether anyone would believe me. But now the people who hurt me were finally losing control. Not because of revenge or anger. Because the truth had reached the right people. I looked upstairs toward Nori's room and felt something I hadn't felt in days. Hope. Not the kind that comes from luck. The kind that comes when powerful people finally realize they can't bury everything forever. That night, the hospital was unusually quiet. Nori had finally fallen asleep after complaining about the terrible pudding they served for dinner. Hearing her joke around again should have made me feel calm, but my mind was still stuck on everything that happened at the investor meeting. I stepped into the hallway to clear my head when my phone suddenly rang. Unknown number. For a second, I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. A man's voice came through the line, low and controlled. Kaya Win? I immediately recognized him. Bren Torv. Betrayal Group's legal advisor. I had only spoken to him a few times before, usually during contract reviews or company meetings. He always sounded polished and polite, the kind of man who never raised his voice because he didn't need to. But this call felt different. You've created a very serious situation, he said calmly. I stayed silent and let him talk. Bren claimed the company was investigating unauthorized financial leaks. Then his tone became colder. If you care about your daughter, he said quietly, you should stop involving yourself in matters you don't understand. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. He didn't directly threaten Nori, but he didn't need to. The message was obvious. Fear rushed through me first. My hand started shaking so badly I had to lean against the wall. But after the fear came something unexpected. Anger. Real anger. Because innocent people don't make calls like that. In that moment, I understood something clearly. Whatever those documents contained had scared them badly enough to come after me personally. That meant the evidence was real. I ended the call without another word and immediately downloaded a recording app onto my phone. From that second forward, I saved every text, voicemail, email, and conversation connected to Betrayal Group. If they wanted to pressure me into silence, they had already failed. Now I wasn't only protecting myself anymore. I was building a case against all of them. A week after the investor meeting exploded into chaos, I met Mirelle Dane for the second time. By then, Nori was finally home from the hospital, sleeping on our living room couch with blankets wrapped around her. Seeing her safe gave me enough strength to keep fighting. Mirelle spread several papers across her conference table and explained every step carefully. She said what Betrayal did to me wasn't just cruel, it could also be illegal. Firing me during a medical emergency, canceling my insurance immediately, and trying to pressure me afterward created a serious case against them. We officially filed lawsuits within days. The paperwork accused Betrayal Group of wrongful termination, retaliation, emotional harm, and unfair cancellation of employee benefits. Mirelle also included evidence connected to suspicious financial activity inside the company. The moment those filings became known privately among investors, the atmosphere around Betrayal completely changed. Elric kept updating me from inside the office. According to him, executives were suddenly holding emergency meetings almost every hour. Employees whispered in hallways about possible investigations. Some managers stopped showing up to work altogether. Investors who once praised the company started asking difficult questions behind closed doors. Large clients delayed contracts. Financial partners became nervous about being connected to the scandal. The people at the top were no longer acting united either. One executive blamed accounting for the missing money. Another claimed certain reports were approved without proper review. Everyone seemed desperate to protect themselves before things became public. Soren Pike reportedly lost his temper during one meeting and accused others of abandoning him. The same people who smiled beside each other during presentations were now turning against one another. Mirelle warned me this was only the beginning. Companies like this don't collapse all at once, she said. They crack slowly from the inside. And for the first time since all of this started, I realized Betrayal wasn't untouchable anymore. The fear had finally moved to their side. A few nights later, Elric came by my apartment again. Nori was asleep in her room, and the whole place was quiet except for the sound of traffic outside the window. The second I opened the door, I could tell something was wrong. Elric looked exhausted. He sat at my kitchen table without even taking off his jacket. For a while, he just stared down at his hands like he was trying to decide how much to say. Then he finally spoke. Soren ran most of it himself. I didn't answer. I just listened. Elric explained that Soren Pike had been creating fake account activity for over a year to make Varello look more profitable than it really was. Investors believed the company was growing fast, which helped executives secure larger bonuses and bigger contracts. According to internal records, Soren personally approved several fake consulting payments and altered reports before meetings with investors. Every inflated number made him look successful. And it worked. A few months earlier, he received a massive bonus package because of those record profits. But the part that shattered me came next. Elric admitted he accidentally overheard a conversation between Soren and someone from HR on the day of Nori's accident. They already planned to remove me from the company because I had started questioning financial inconsistencies during audits. When Soren learned I was rushing to the hospital, he saw an opportunity. He pushed HR to send the termination notice immediately while I was distracted and emotionally overwhelmed. He believed I wouldn't notice missing files or suspicious reports during a crisis involving my daughter. I felt numb listening to it. While I was sitting in that ambulance praying my little girl would survive, my boss was using the situation to protect himself. Not once did he think about me as a person. Not once did he care about Nori. To him, we were simply a problem that needed to disappear. That realization changed something inside me completely. The sadness I carried for days slowly disappeared and turned into determination. After that night, I stopped feeling guilty about what might happen to them. They made their choices already. Several weeks later, I walked back into Varello Group headquarters for the first time since I was fired. The building looked exactly the same from the outside: shiny glass walls, security guards near the entrance, employees rushing through the lobby with coffee cups in their hands. But inside, everything felt different. Nobody greeted me anymore. Conversation stopped when I walked past. Some people lowered their eyes like they were ashamed to be seen near me. Others looked nervous, like they already knew the company was falling apart. I wasn't there as an employee this time. I was there because federal investigators wanted my testimony. 2 agents met me near the elevators and escorted me upstairs. As we entered the executive floor, I noticed several office doors standing open while investigators searched through filing cabinets and removed computer equipment. Cardboard boxes filled with financial records lined the hallway. The atmosphere was tense and chaotic. People whispered into phones while lawyers rushed from room to room trying to control the damage. Then I saw Soren Pike standing outside the boardroom. For a moment, he looked nothing like the confident executive who once controlled everyone around him. His tie was loose, his face looked pale, and dark circles sat under his eyes like he hadn't slept in days. He saw me and immediately looked away. Inside the boardroom, investigators played recorded calls connected to company transactions. Some of those recordings included conversations between executives discussing hidden accounts and altered reports. The evidence was worse than I expected. Soren tried blaming the accounting department first. Then he claimed other executives approved the payments without his knowledge. But every trail led back to him. His name appeared on transfer approvals, bonus requests, and authorization forms tied to the missing money. Even the threatening phone call from Bran Torv helped investigators connect the pressure campaign against me. One by one, the people who once protected Soren started distancing themselves from him. And sitting in that same boardroom where I had spent years working overtime and trying to prove my worth, I finally watched the people who destroyed my life lose control of everything they built. Months passed before everything finally came to an end. By then, Varello Group barely looked like the company I once worked for. Several top executives had resigned quietly after investigators uncovered more hidden financial records. Employees were laid off, offices closed, and investors pulled their money away as fast as they could. Soren Pike faced criminal fraud charges along with multiple financial crimes tied to the missing funds. The confident man who once controlled boardrooms now entered court buildings surrounded by lawyers and cameras, avoiding every question thrown at him. I watched part of the hearings from the back row beside Morel. Sometimes Soren glanced in my direction, but he never held eye contact for long. The lawsuits eventually ended in a settlement large enough to completely change my life. Every hospital bill connected to Nori's accident was paid. I no longer had to panic every time I checked my mailbox or answered the phone. For the first time in months, I could breathe without feeling fear sitting my chest. But the money wasn't the part that stayed with me most. One afternoon after a court session, an older investor approached me outside the courthouse. I recognized him from the meeting that first exposed the fraud. He shook my hand and said something I still think about all the time. "You didn't just uncover corruption," he told me quietly. "You stopped these people from hurting others too." Those words hit harder than any settlement check ever could. Because in the beginning, I only wanted to survive. I wanted my daughter safe. I wanted justice for what they did to us. I never imagined the truth would bring down an entire company. As Nori and I walked down the courthouse steps together that final day, she reached for my hand and smiled up at me like everything was finally over. And standing there beside my daughter, I realized something important. The woman they tried so hard to silence became the reason their whole empire collapsed. After everything they did to me and my daughter, do you think I was right to fight back, or should I have walked away and moved on? Tell me your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe with notifications on for more emotional stories like this.